What is the chilling secret of Morningside Mortuary?
Who is the mysterious tall man?
And what is up with that crazy ball?
These and other questions will be answered on this week's
It's Frenzy Frights.
Welcome to Frenzy Frights, a horror movie review show. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we are your hosts.
We are going to try to talk about some horror movies, monster movies, creature features, and spook shows of all sorts. We love these movies, even if sometimes they fall short. We will share our love for these films, but also point out issues in a genre-appropriate way.
We will definitely be rating these movies on a curve. So, Chris, what movie are we talking about today?
Thank you, Professor. We are going to look at something I'm eager to talk about. This is Phantasm from 1979. It was directed by Don Coscarelli, written by Don Coscarelli, produced by D.A. Coscarelli, cinematography done by Don Coscarelli, edited by Don Coscarelli. I see a theme here.
Yeah.
Music by Fred Myrow and Malcolm Seagrave. The release date on this, check it out, was March 28th, 1979, which coincidentally just so happened to be Prof. Gerry's 16th birthday. Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
The running time on this was just a mere 89 minutes. For our cast, we have Angus Scrimm as the tall man, A. Michael Baldwin as Mike Pearson, Bill Thornberry as Jody Pearson, Reggie Bannister as Reggie, Kathy Lester as the Lady in Lavender, Bill Cohn played Tommy, Kenneth V. Jones as the caretaker, Mary Ellen Shaw as the fortune teller, Terry Kalbus as the fortune teller's granddaughter, Laurie Mann as Double Lavender, Susan Harper as Sue, Lynn Eastman as Sally. Gerry, give us a brief synopsis of the movie, and we will follow up with our thoughts.
All right. So we meet Tommy, who looks much like Dwayne Allman, and he's in the cemetery having sexy times with a woman in lavender when she stabs him. That's unusual. So we cut to his burial at the Morningside Cemetery Mausoleum Funeral Home Complex, where we meet dead Tommy's brother, Jody, and Reggie, the ice cream man. We find out that the official story is that Tommy killed himself. Well, that's weird. The three of them were in a band together. Now what are they going to do? I don't know. So Jody has a motorhead 13-year-old brother, Mike, who's basically the star of the movie. Since their parents just died and Mike freaked out at their funeral, Jody didn't let Mike come to Tommy's funeral. Mike shows up on his dirt bike anyway and watches at a distance with binoculars. We meet the tall man, owner of Morningside, who tells Jody the service is starting. After the funeral, Mike spies the tall man picking up Tommy's coffin all by himself and putting it into the back of the hearse. That dude's strong. That thing is like 500 pounds. We find out that Mike knows Jody is going to leave home and sends him to live with his aunt, but Mike doesn't want to do that. So Mike is following Jody around a lot. He's very insecure and possessive. At night at the cemetery, Jody is having sexy times with that same woman in lavender, and Mike is spying on them. But in the bushes, there's a small Jawa-looking dude, from Star Wars, a short guy with a monk hood, and you can't see the face. And Mike runs off screaming, which causes Phantasmus Interruptus, and Jody has to leave the woman behind to get Mike. Mike tells Jody about the Jawa, but Jody doesn't believe him. The next day, Mike is walking the streets of the little town, sucking on a lollipop and checking the payphones for change, just like every other 13-year-old in 1979. And he sees the tall man walking on the other side of the street. And the tall man has a weird reaction when he walks past Reggie's open ice cream truck. The tall man has some serious feelings about the cold fog coming out of the truck. He doesn't seem to like it. So Mike goes to Morningside to get clues and almost gets caught. He gets chased by the tall man and the killer flying ball from the cover of the Blu-ray that sucks out your brains. Mike slams the tall man's finger in a door and cuts one off, and it oozes yellow blood. And Mike takes it home like you do. Mike shows Jody the weird finger that's still moving in the yellow ooze. Yeah, Jody believes Mike now. Something's up. Phew. And when he looks again, the finger has turned into a flying, buzzing, rat-sized hornet creature. Mike and Jody wrestle with the thing and put it down the garbage disposal. Reggie shows up. What's up, guys? But the thing crawls out of the disposal and there is mayhem. And they finally kill the buzzy thing. Reggie is on the Scooby Gang. Jody goes to Morningside and gets attacked by Jawas. He shoots one and scrams, but the hearse starts up and follows him with no driver. Mike shows up in the Barracuda, which is a triple black 440 6-barrel 1971 Plymouth Barracuda, if anyone cares. And they shoot at the hearse from the Cuda and have an exciting chase. They stop the hearse and capture the Jawa inside, and they unmask it. It's a miniature Tommy. What? They call Reggie to bring his ice cream truck and lock Tommy in the cooler. Oh boy, that ice cream is going to be yucky. Back home, the three wonder why Morningside is taking bodies and crushing them to half size. Now, we get some action shenanigans, which include an antique shop that has an old-timey photo of the tall man on a horse-drawn hearse that turns into a video. Mike says he has to go home, and the two girls bring him in their VW Bug. Meanwhile, in the ice cream truck, Reggie is attacked by the Jawa. Mike and the girls find the truck rolled over on the side of the road. Where's Reggie? Where's Tommy? Mike insists over and over that they leave. Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. But the girls are talking and they don't leave, and then they're attacked. Mike gets out the back window of the Bug as the car drives off with the screaming girls inside. At home, Jody locks Mike in his bedroom. Don't leave. You'll be safe here. Yeah, right. Haven't you seen a horror movie before? Mike builds an explosive device to escape using a hammer, thumbtack, shot shell, and some scotch tape. But the tall man arrives at the house and grabs Mike and throws him into the hearse. But Mike shoots out the back window and rear tire and escapes, and the hearse crashes and explodes. At Morningside, Mike and Jody find the empty caskets of their parents. Their Jawas too now, I guess. Jody has to destroy a ball flying at them. They find what I'll call the tuning fork room when Reggie arrives. He's not dead, and he saved the girls. Whew. FYI, Reggie is pretty much the hero of the franchise, and this is his first big win, so go Reggie. They go into the tuning fork room. It's all white with two big metal tines coming out of the floor and an ever-present loud hum. There are also barrels full of Jawas. Mike realizes that between the tines is a gate to another planet, and he gets sucked into the gate, and he sees the other planet, and the other two pull him back into the room. Mike now realizes the Jawas are slaves on this other planet and are crushed to deal with the gravity, the high gravity of the planet. Sure, sounds good. It's good, as good an explanation as any. The lights go out and what sounds like Jawas attack, and the team gets separated. The lights come back on and Reggie's in the tuning fork room. He remembers how the tuning fork works and puts his hand on both tines and then is almost sucked into the gate, and he barely escapes the room. Reggie leaves the house, and outside there's a huge windstorm. The lady in lavender approaches him, and he's like, oh, I'll save you. And she kills him, and he collapses on the ground. And it turns out that she is actually the tall man. Hold on a sec. Does that mean that both Tommy and Jody had sexy... No, never mind. Moving on. Mike and Jody find Reggie dead. The pair lure the tall man to an abandoned mine shaft that is 1,000 feet deep, and they trick him into falling in the hole, and they roll huge boulders into the pit. Yay, he's dead. But it turns out it was only a dream. Mike is telling Reggie this story. Reggie isn't dead now, by the way, but it turns out that Jody has recently died in a car wreck, and this dream, Reggie suggests, is about that. First, they took the mom and dad, Mike says, then Jody, and now me. Was Tommy just a dream brother, by the way? Anyway, Reggie tells Mike he's going to raise him and he's never going to be alone. Let's get out of here, kid. Let's go on a road trip. Get up there and pack. Cool. So Mike goes up to his room to pack, but in his room, the tall man appears in the mirror. Boy! And Mike is pulled into the closet by creatures. Dun, dun, dun.
Awesome rendition, Prof. I got to give you props for that.
Thank you. That was fun. I love this movie. So, Chris, what are some of your thinking about Phantasm?
Well, thanks, Prof. Let's get some trivia out of the way. Per wiki, most of the ideas for Phantasm were developed by Coscarelli from a nightmare he had as a teenager, in which he was chased down by a long corridor of a flying chrome spear, which he feared would drill his brain out. After seeing audience reaction to jump scares in Kenny and Company, Coscarelli, who was the writer and director for the film, decided to do a horror film for his next project. His previous films had not performed well, and he heard that horror films were always successful. Branching into horror allowed him to combine his childhood love for the genre with better business prospects. The original idea was inspired by Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Coscarelli had initially sought to adapt the story into a film, but the license had already sold. The theme of a young boy's difficulty convincing adults of his fears was influenced by the movie Invaders from Mars from 1953. Dario Argento's Suspiria from 1977 and its lack of explanations was another influence on Coscarelli. The soundtrack was influenced by Goblin and Mike Oldfield. The synthesizers used for the film were so primitive that it was often difficult to reproduce the same sound twice. When writing the film's conclusion, Coscarelli intentionally wanted to shock audiences and, quote, send people out of the theater with a bang. Wow. Let's talk about some casting. Coscarelli cast the film using actors who had appeared in his previous work, often writing the parts exclusively for them. How cool is that? Michael Baldwin's character of Mike Pearson was specifically written for him after Baldwin appeared in a minor role, Coscarelli's second feature, Kenny and Company. I've never heard of that until I did some research for this movie.
Yeah.
Coscarelli attributes the ending or the enduring popularity of the film to young audiences who responded to the character of Mike and his adventures throughout the film. Yeah. After being intimidated by Scrim on the set of a previous film entitled Jim the World's Greatest from 1976, Coscarelli decided that Scrim would make a great villain and cast him as the Tall Man. Initially, Scrim had little input on the character, though, but began contributing to the character's construction after Coscarelli began to trust his instincts. Scrim was outfitted in lifts and a suit too small for him in order to make him seem even taller and skinnier. Coscarelli says of Scrim, I really didn't have any idea that he would take it to the level that he did. I could see this was going to be a very powerful character. Well, with respect to the filming, and especially when I was listening to the cast on the credits, there were no accountants on the set. But Coscarelli estimates that the budget of the film was about $300,000. Funding for the film came, in part, from Coscarelli's father, who was credited as the film's producer. Additional funding came from doctors and lawyers. Coscarelli's mother designed some of the special effects, costumes, and even the makeup, receiving under several alternate pseudonyms, which I'll talk about in a moment. Coscarelli commented, we decided to do that because it would look ridiculous otherwise. There were already too many Coscarellis in the credits, as it was. The cast and crew were made up mainly of Coscarelli's friends and other aspiring professionals. Due to their inexperience, they did not realize firing blanks could be dangerous. Coscarelli's jacket at one point caught fire from a shotgun blank. Because he couldn't afford to hire an editor or a cameraman, Coscarelli also performed these duties himself. The filming for this movie began in 1977, and it was done on the weekends, as sometimes it lasted about 20 hours a day over the course for more than a year. Actor Reggie Bannister, who performed most of his own stunts in the film, described the production as, quote, flying by the seat of our pants, unquote. The actors often would be called to perform their scenes and picked up as soon as they were available. Though the film is set in Oregon, principal photography took place primarily in the San Fernando Valley of Chatsworth, California. An ice cream shop on the main street was filmed on the outskirts of San Diego County in Julian, California. The exteriors of Morningside Mortuary were shot at Oakland's Dunsmore House in Northern California. Due to logistic and budgetary restrictions, the interiors of the mausoleum were constructed on a local warehouse in the Los Angeles area. The script changed often during production, and Bannister says that he never even saw a completed copy of it. Instead, they worked scene by scene and used improvisation. In late 2015, with respect to restoration, Coscarelli showed a work in progress of a 4K resolution restoration of Phantasm, dubbed Phantasm Remastered, at the Butt-Numb-a-thon Film Festival. It was supervised by Coscarelli at Bad Robot. Bad Robot became involved when director J.J. Abrams, a huge fan of the Phantasm series, requested a screening of the film. Coscarelli told him that he didn't have a high-quality print, but Abrams volunteered the use of his technicians for restoration. The completed restoration premiered at South by Southwest in March 2016. The remastered version of the film was released in limited theaters in the United States in conjunction with Art House Theater Day on September 24, 2016. Just as a side note, I presume this is the most recent version of the movie that I saw because as the credits are rolling, I see Bad Robot logos on the outset. I was like, wait, what? What is this? What year is this? Yeah. Don Coscarelli rented out all of the filming equipment used to make this movie, always doing so on Fridays, so he could use it all weekend and return it on Monday while actually having to pay one-day rental on the equipment. The spheres were designed by craftsman Willard Green, who charged the production a little over $1,100 for his services. Sadly, though, he died just after production was completed at the end of 1977. He never got to see his work on the big screen. The stone-looking interior of the mausoleum was actually constructed of plywood and marble-colored plastic contact paper. It certainly fooled me. And as previously stated, Don Coscarelli's mother was a novelist by the name of Kate Coscarelli, and she held several titles on the production, even using two aliases, one S. Tyler and one Shirley May, for production design and makeup/costume design. She also wrote a novel adaptation based on the film. It was published in 2002, and only 500 copies of it were ever produced. Well, Prof, let's dive into it. We're going to give our quote-unquote review of this movie. What were your thoughts and impressions, my friend?
Well, I've loved Phantasm since I first saw it on VHS from a rental store, from the pre-Blockbuster rental store days. And I've shown it to many people over the years with very mixed results. Some love it, especially people that are used to horror or indie kind of movies, but others don't. And I definitely understand why some people may not get this movie, but I personally love the semi-professional quality of the movie. This is a family project, right? There's a lot of love and heart that make up for any technical issues, in my opinion. I don't think when I watch a horror movie, you can get impressed by the technical prowess of a movie, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good movie, or even how much a movie makes sense, which this one has some questions that we'll definitely talk about, but rather the vibe that monster horror fans can pick up the vibe. Phantasm is like the only horror franchise that I'm into, like Friday the 13th or the Halloween movies. I don't really like any of them, but I do like all the Phantasm movies. I adore all of the films. So the question, does the ending make sense? And no, I don't think it does make sense. But the sequels of the movie, they work with the shock ending, right? So the ending that changed, that Reggie is alive and Jody is dead. That's how, that's where the plot of the subsequent movies pick up. Was there ever really a Tommy? Because, in the post-dream sequence, they don't mention Tommy. So was that like a dream brother or something? And I've seen a lot of analysis how this movie could make sense. Alternate multi-dimensions, alternate worlds. He changed reality when he went through the whatever. I think what really happened is they wanted to have a twist ending. They got the shots that they got. The script was in whatever condition it was when they were shooting. And the editor, Don Coscarelli, did what he could with the footage. And this is very normal in the indie horror world. You get the shots you got, you put together the movie you've got, and that's it. There are a couple of elements there's a really cool scene that I haven't seen in years. It's like this claustrophobic horror where Mike is under the car working on it, and we hear, outside, the car's up on a jack, and you hear these Jawa sounds, and the car is shaking, the jack is shaking, what's going on? And the car falls, doesn't crush Mike, but, it's that really cool claustrophobic horror. There is one kind of trigger alert They use the R word about the kid down the street, and it is 1979, so I wanted to give that warning out there. Interesting thing about the ball, we only see it, I think we only see it twice. And once it mistakenly kills one of its own guys, and the next time it just comes around the corner, gets shot, and destroyed. So the ball doesn't really take all that much, isn't that big a focus for the movie itself. It's more the tall man in the movie, but it's really cool looking on the poster. I realize that, the movie doesn't have all the shots it needs. The editing is a little wonky. The actors are fine, but not Hollywood good looking. I love this movie in the early 80s, so it isn't the nostalgia that makes me love it. There's just a vibe that works for me that a lot of other movies don't have. So, just before we go on too much more, Chris, what are some of your thoughts about Phantasm?
Thank you, Prof. Prof, I noticed that right out of the gate, you shared when you first saw it. And I think that's something that's huge and it can't be understated because that's what popped in my mind when I first came at this. Prof, I think there's a moment in an age where when something in media, be it a song, a comic book, or in this case, a movie comes at us respectively. I was probably 13, give or take a year when I first saw this after hours on HBO, which was my gateway to a lot of rated R movies from around that specific time period. Comedies like Animal House and Caddyshack, sci-fi like Alien and Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake, and horror like Halloween, The Shining, and here, Phantasm.
Yep.
Prof, I forget where I read it, and again, it was probably Wikipedia, that a lot of fans of this movie were adolescent males, and I certainly can vouch for that. Yep. While I liked this movie very, very much, I knew a kid in school who loved this movie, and probably to the point of obsession. He was seeing this at every possible opportunity, and you have to keep in mind back then, remember, this was in the days of just before VCRs, and being able to watch something when you wanted to. You had to pay attention to like the HBO schedule and time frame, and that was your window of opportunity. This kid kept watching it, despite the movie giving him nightmares, specifically the silver orb with the 3 blades jutting out of it, chasing him. And this kid was drawing orbs in his notebook, and this occupied him many a school period. So this movie had a huge, huge influence. Prof, another thing I liked when I listened to you give your thoughts and impressions, I think somewhere in there you mentioned a word that I like called semi-professionalism. I dig that because early on, just right out of the gate, we get a shot of the funeral home. And I love how we get these profile shots of Reggie coming into the frame from the right and Jody coming in from the left, that they both enter this picture. And it's very seemingly awkward and unnatural, but they start this conversation and I love it. I just love that.
Yep.
Just some other observations before we continue. Prof, you pointed out some things here and there. There is this bit, though, where they show a cantina, and the exterior of this cantina, my gosh, damn, it is small, but especially the exterior shot of it. It's almost like a car. It looks bigger than the cantina itself, but the interior shot looks so much larger. And Prof, as you said, there are things you just shoot in and you work with what you have. Looking back, Prof, yes, this is a horror movie, I'll grant you that, but I think if you look a little deeper, this really pokes into our own psyches as we have this adolescent dealing with the death of an older loved one. And this is where the mind goes. And I think that there's a little more meat on the bone than perhaps at surface and face value. So I really, really dig that with respect to Phantasm. Yes, it's a horror movie, but I think there's a little bit more here that makes you think. It is disjointed at times, but aren't most dreams disjointed as well? So, Prof, I can't wait till we get into our next segment. We're both going to share some of our favorite moments of this, and I'll let you take the floor first because you've got some really, really outstanding thoughts here. So what were your favorite moments of this film, Gerry?
So definitely one of my favorite moments is the jam session. So Jody is sitting on the front porch playing his Stratocaster with some song that they've written, and Reggie's ice cream truck pulls up and he pulls out an acoustic guitar and he goes, sits by him, and he just starts playing the song. They just start playing and singing together, and it's awesome. It's so much fun. And it sounds pretty good. And from what I understand, it was pretty natural. They just, they're both musicians, and they just showed up and jammed to a song, and that was awesome. I also like the Reggie isn't dead reveal, after the dream sequence is over. I really like Reggie as a character here, and he's definitely one of my favorite characters. And it was great that he wasn't really dead, even though it was confusing. The cars, the Barracuda, you know, all the weapons that they have around the house, those old fashioned 1970s version ice cream trucks, a 13-year-old floppy headed kid driving cars and drinking beers. It's so 70s. I love it. I love it so much. And there is a side story about this old lady psychic and her granddaughter, and they have kind of a it's like from Dune, the Gom Jabbar, where they, put your hand in the thing. Oh, it hurts. It hurts. Michael, fear is the killer. It was all in your mind, that kind of stuff. So all that stuff was definitely picked up from Dune, I think. I thought you mentioned about, the adolescent kids, and I think that whole feel of Michael. He was in a family that's kind of broken down, and that's sad and hard on a kid, but it is also freeing. And he's definitely gives you that 70s teenager. He can drive, he can drink beer, he works on cars, he has a dirt bike that he can take everywhere, and he's, brave, and he gets into trouble and he gets out of trouble, and he fights, and he can make explosive inventions. He's a cool kid. And I think a lot of the love, especially for young people, young boys, particularly teenage boys that are watching this movie, really would love to have been Mike. So I don't know, Chris, what are some of your favorite moments of this movie?
Prof, I have to keep going back to it. It's the orbs. I mean, this was pretty ballsy and cool from a horror movie perspective. This was really unique. And I remember us guys as kids just staying around in a circle talking about this movie. And it always comes back to the orbs, how cool the orbs were. Dude, did you see the orbs? Man, I have nightmares about these orbs. Love it, love it, love it.
Love it.
Prof, there were some really unique shots. I was kind of being hard a little bit here and there with respect to the way the movie was shot, but I love the lighting in the mausoleum. I love how the mausoleum scenes were shot. Very, very ominous. And I really, really thought this was well done. It was almost too crisp of a copy, and I thought I wanted to get some nostalgia feels, thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind seeing it in 4K. I didn't have to have the 4K. I could just see the original copy. I think I still would have been happy, but the version I saw was really, really crisp, so I almost now want to do a compare and contrast. This is out of nowhere, but the wardrobe. I like Jody's Rolling Stones t-shirt. I thought that was really, really cool. He was popping this thing. Prof, you mentioned the cars. Yeah. And just the sound that they made sort of evoked a memory as well, hearing this. And just, yeah, I could really kind of relate to the sound of those cars as they were coming down the street back then. Prof, there was a little bit of a throwaway scene where the tall man comes to life when he's looking at the picture. I love that. It was sort of in a sepia tone, and he just sort of turns and has this really, really cool image like that. Prof, I'm glad you included the jam session. I didn't have it in my notes, but I thought it was a marvelous scene. It really seemed organic, and it really seemed like this was kind of perhaps improv a little bit, but they were really jamming, and I really, really love that. Prof, another thing I put in my notes at the last minute, a lot was really asked of the actors in the sense of the physicality sense. With respect to, okay, I've got this giant bug under a towel. Now it's whipping me around. Now I'm thrusting myself into the wall as if it's alive and it's controlling me. There were a lot of scenes where the actors had to be manipulated, but not by a quote unquote scene force. There were scenes like that in cars. There were scenes like that in interior shots. And they really sold it. And it was like, oh my gosh, they're going to get hurt at the way they're throwing themselves headfirst into these walls and into these cars and other objects. It was really, really effective. And I was looking to see, okay, am I going to let up? No, they went at it full force when they were getting thrown around or throwing themselves literally into these things. Prof, we talked about some of the decor back then. I liked the shag carpeting that were on the steps that was in this house. Yes, this was the 1970s. Prof, you commented with the interiors. One thing that, stood out to me was that shag carpeting on the steps. It was really garish and just kind of strands of this thing was just hanging off of these steps. And it was just, my gosh, what were we thinking back then? But I certainly remember seeing that. back in the day, and it was something. And you kind of look at like who would put such a thing on these steps, but yeah, that those things existed. One of the things too I liked was when Mike was looking through this portal and he sees this ominous thing or if you call them the Jawas, and they're kind of walking around, and there's this red blackness, red blackness, this redness to the sky that's all around that I can only presume is sort of like a version of hell or purgatory. And I thought, wow, that was really, really cool. Yeah, this was really, really good stuff. I just really like the vibe of this. And Phantasm may not come up in a lot of conversation, but it certainly holds a warm place in my heart with some really good nostalgia feels as well as some very, very effective horror.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really like this 70s vibe is very different than like the Stranger Things, 70s, 80s vibe, because this one isn't fake. This is the house that they probably rented to make the movie, or maybe Coscarelli's house or something, that had real shag carpet on the stairs, as opposed to, a movie like Stranger Things, which is kind of evoking the era, like as a nostalgic thing. And I think that like when Mike is in his room trying to get out, you realize that door is just one of those cheap core doors. He could probably have just punched his fist through and unlocked himself, but it's more fun watching him make a little bomb. But I really like the genuine 70ness of this movie.
Prof, that's a good point. And as you mentioned too, that's another thing I didn't have in my notes. It was like I really like how he came up with finding a shotgun shell and just doing an improvisation with the hammer and doing that, as though you said he literally could have put his fist through that door, as such it was, but it made for an effective shot. Prof, one thing I did notice, and you triggered a memory when you were saying that, was there was also a shot of him, and it was shot in such a way where we get this overhead shot as if from the ceiling, looking down on him as he's doing this. And one of the things that we see in his room is a model plane hanging from the ceiling. And I thought, yeah, that was really, really cool. Now, this looked like a bigger quote unquote model plane than you would normally see in a kid's room from back in the day. But I really like that touch because they were sort of, at least in my mind, from what I recall from this time period, these were still being made, these were still mass produced, and you could certainly still find them at a model shop or on a toy shelf. But these were slowly kind of going away. But I still like the fact, though, that this guy had one of these models and it was hanging from his ceiling, because a lot of kids hung these from their ceilings back in the day. And I really thought this was a really good touch. So props to the set designer, whoever thought of that, and props to Coscarelli for giving us that shot where we got to see some of the nuances of the rooms and his trappings in same said room there. Prof, I like the compare contrast that you thought. And you thought of Stranger Things, and I have to confess I didn't, because, yeah, late 70s, early 80s, we're right in this time frame, and it's good to kind of take a look and see what's going on between both of these things.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one thing I also liked is that whole tuning fork, in the tuning fork room where you had the tines come up. They teased that during that jam session. So when Reggie was kind of tuning his guitar, he used a tuning fork, and he kind of realizes, he thinks back to that moment when he's in the tuning fork room with the hum. He's realizing that the hum is coming from these two tines sticking out of the floor, and he puts his hands on the tines, and it deadens the noise and creates the kind of sucking, wind that, tries to suck him into the other planet or wherever. So I thought that was a good, they didn't none of this stuff just came from nowhere. It was all teased in advance, and I thought that was really cool.
Prof, I don't know if we have any more to talk about. Think I've covered everything that I had to say, but you're bringing up some things organically during the course of your conversation. But before I forget, how would you rank this movie, or could you even rank it? And are you going to have to include some of your biases? Hey, this came out on your birthday. Hey, when you saw this, and you're kind of promoting this with some groups of other people and your friends and catching their opinions. So I think I'm sensing this does have a soft place in your heart. That said, if you were to give it either a letter grade or a numeric grade from a scale of, say, 1 to 10, I'm kind of curious as to how you would rank this.
That's interesting, because I think if you compared it like a movie, like, Titanic, and compared it to like that, it's not going to come out well at all because, the technical, ability of the filmmakers is, limited. However, there's so much heart in it. It's really hard for me to come up with that kind of objectively. But for me personally, in my horror movie, fandom, this is going to be very high. I'm going to rate this. I'd cut it down a couple points because I recognize that there are some plot problems, but I would give it like an 8 out of 10, I think. And recognizing that I'm definitely, I'm not being objective about it at all. How about you, Chris? What would you rate this?
Prof, I don't want to cheat or say like I'm copying off your paper, but if you were to like, Chris, can you hold up what you were? Yeah, I know you can't see it, but literally that's what I have in my mind too. Wow. This was an 8 out of a 10 for me. Granted, I think I'm a little bit slanted with the bias because I'm incorporating some of my nostalgia feels for this, but this is my own scale. This is like a solid B for me. Yeah. I see a lot of originality, and Prof, as you said, this was made with a lot of heart. And I think seeing what the finished product was versus what they were up against, and not taking into account the many, many hours of editing that had to be done from Coscarelli, and I'm not even taking that into account. I'm just looking at the bottom line here. This was very, very effectively done, and I really, really dug it. Prof, you said this is, out of the horror franchises, this is the one that kind of is at the top of your list. To be fair, I think when I was researching this, I think there were 5 Phantasm movies, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I've only seen 2 or 3. I'm trying to remember what happened in 3, but I know I've seen the first 2 for sure. So now I'm going to have to revisit everything and kind of immerse myself with respect to that. Prof, this was a great movie, and I cannot undersell or understate what it was to a certain age group at a certain time period right then and there, at least where I was. And this was really, really good stuff. Fantastic. Very, very ballyhooed, very, very talked about. And then all of a sudden we grow up and there's something else moving on, but there's always going to be soft places in our hearts for Phantasm.
Absolutely. And in the second movie, they replace the actor that played Mike, but then Mike, the original actor, comes back for the rest of the movies.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a little, the guy the replacement for Mike is perfectly good. He's very good. But 2 is owned by a different production company or distribution company or something. And it is sometimes hard to get all of the movies together because they have to make a separate deal with whoever owns 2. But if, I have them all, and I think that picture, the video picture of the tall man on the horse-drawn hearse at the antique store, that kind of era comes back later. That we get some background on the tall man, who he was, where he came from, and I thought it was pretty interesting stuff.
Excellent.
So thank you for checking out Nightmares and Popcorn. Check out our other shows, the Professor Frenzy Show, where we cover indie comics, That Guy in That Show, where we look at great character actors, and our Twilight Zone episode review, where we review, wait for it, Twilight Zone episodes. Thank you for listening.
The Professor Frenzy Show!
Professor Frenzy, it's a show. Professor Frenzy show. Professor Frenzy, it's a show. Professor Frenzy show.